everyone. Welcome to the Rainey Tenney Show. I have such a special show for you today. Marylyn Vancil is with me via virtual, and we are going to talk about her book, Self to Lose, Self to Find, A Biblical Approach to the 9 Enneagram Types. And this is good. Marylyn Vancil is with me, and I could not be more excited. The people that are watching, your mind is about to be blown, and I am just really thrilled. Without further ado, I want to just talk about Marylyn just for a second. Marylyn is the author of the incredible book, Self to Lose, Self to Find, A Biblical Approach to the 9 Enneagram Types. Enneagram is very old, but really kind of making a resurgence, and we're going to talk about that. But the book is currently being republished by Random House, which is a big deal because you pretty much self-published it the first time. But also, she's working on a new book, and that's going to focus on taking the Enneagram to a deeper level in transformational growth, which is one of the reasons I'm so thrilled you're here, and we're going to get into that. She's a spiritual director, speaker, and workshop presenter, and I bet what she would say her most important job is a mom to 4 kids, 11 grandchildren, and married for 47 years to Jeff.
Yes.
Right?
Amen.
Marylyn, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to dig right in because I have so much. Marylyn, for those watching or listening to the podcast, they've never heard of the Enneagram or have even heard that word. What is that? They don't know what it is. Can you give us a brief overview? What is the Enneagram?
Sure. Well, it's a strange word that, people go, the what? The Ennea what? So Ennea means 9, gram means a drawing. So it's 9 personalities, 9 filters, 9 ways of being in the world that people exhibit, and it's arranged on a diagram, or not a diagram, but a symbol. A circle, and so there are 9 different types. And so basically the difference between the Enneagram and other personality profiles is that it goes down to the deeper level of your inner motivations, your inner story, your inner perceptions, those things. That it gives you the why of why you think the way you think, or behave the way you do, or feel the way you do. So it gives you some clues to that, your motivations, which is important to look at.
So now that we know what the Enneagram is, it's obviously so important to you. You wrote a book about it. What I loved about this book and what I couldn't believe is you talked about the authentic self and the adapted self. So what I love about that is I have kind of over the last 14 years gotten to that place too. I was training a group of people a couple of weekends ago, and I called it the true self, the original, the OG, the original gangsta, which is a pop culture term. But so I kept referring to it as your OG. And then I read this book, and you mentioned the authentic self and the adapted self, and there are 2 people running the show here. And I think that is something that is really transformational, and I want to talk about that. So I feel like we're finally getting there. 2020, we're finally getting there where more people are talking about it. And I really feel like knowing that there's 2 selves running the show, I really feel like the more we know about that, our lives can truly change. We can truly have that transformational growth and become more like Christ, which is what he talks about a lot. Can you help the people understand at home what the authentic self is versus the adapted self? Those are the 2 people that you describe in your book.
Sure. Well, we'll start with the authentic self. So I didn't like the word true self and false self. Those words, true self and false self, I think they can be kind of confusing, like what's true, what's false, because They both exist. They both feel true. And so I changed the term to the authentic self, or the truest self. And that's who we were originally designed to be, created in God's image, that deepest part of us that is created to reflect an attribute of God. And I believe that each person is a unique reflection of God. We aren't God, but we are created in his image to reflect part of who God is. And so we have a specialty that God put in us to express in the world, but also to experience for ourselves. So it's really important to us, and it's really taps into the deepest longings of our hearts and our giftedness, our God-gifted self. And then the adapted self is we are born into this world where we have to adapt. We have to figure out how to get along, how to get love, how to be safe, how to have control. All of these are basic human needs. And we learn as really as very small children, what works and what doesn't, what we get praised for and what we're punished for. And so we create this perception, or we take on this perception that we have to be a certain way. And we build this adapted self to protect us. And I liken it to a seed coat in my book, a seed, and the seed is the true seed is on the inside, but there's a seed coat around it to protect it until it's time for it to sprout and flourish. So that's the adapted self. And it's something we all have to do. But the problem is when we hang on to that too long and it runs the show, and we don't even know that it's running the show, like you said. And there's this deeper self that is wanting to be expressed, but it's covered up by these strategies and these habits. We have these habitual habits, and we have these distorted beliefs about who we are supposed to be. And if we stay on autopilot and we're not aware of those, then it stops really working for us, but we don't know why.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So, it totally makes sense. I love this. And so the adapted self is probably where our struggle in relationships come from. We are not communicating, or not communicating well, or we are protecting ourselves from seeming danger in relationships that may or may not be true, but we are so used to trigger words and everything that, like you said, as small children has piled on us. We have managed to cope with using our adapted self, which is not vulnerable, which is inauthentic, and which is not coming from the actual quiet, joyful soul God made. Right? And if we can learn to separate the two and get there, then a whole new world opens up. It's really not new. It's been there. It's new to us. Marylinn, one of the little things in your book that I loved, you say, one Halloween, our grandson expressed this human dilemma quite adamantly. He was dressing in his very thin Transformer robot costume, and his mom insisted he wear it over his own clothes before heading out into the cold. He protested. The argument persisted until he finally shouted, "If people see my regular clothes sticking out, they will know that I'm just a little kid in a costume." As we held back our laughter, we also realized he had proclaimed something profound. For him, he was both an imaginary Optimus Prime and a real boy. For us, we seem to embody two identities at the same time, one that is pretend and one that is true. I loved this. And that's it. Yeah. I'm sure it's a sweet story. And now with 3 children, I'm like, it's just so cute. But it really, to have that as an example of your authentic versus adapted is just, it's gold. And I love this example. I'm so glad you put it in this book. And it really just makes this easy to understand. Marylinn, if people are listening and going, okay, how do I know when I am acting from my adapted self, and how do I know when I'm acting from my authentic self? Can you give us an example of that?
Just a simple way to think about it and to notice in yourself is the adapted self is usually very reactive. It's defensive. It's fighting for itself. It's self-absorbed, self-referential, self-protective. And so there's this energy of protection and reaction. And then the other word for the authentic self would be being receptive and responsive. It's more of a pause, and there's freedom, a lack of defensiveness, there's an openness, and because there's nothing to defend if we are free in Christ and walking in our truest self, then we don't have to react and fight back and be defensive. So that's a good way, I think, of distinguishing that. And so in a relationship, you asked for an example. Would you like an example still?
Well, I thought of an example, but yours is probably better. So continue.
Well, I was just thinking of an example in relationship with my husband when he's, a common thing is for me to share something and then he speaks back and I react. Like there's something in me that reacts and pushes him away, his comment away, rather than being responsive and open. And so what is going on in me that resists or reacts against his comment is that I feel like I was dismissed somehow. And so that's my part of my Enneagram type. And so I then get reactive inside and close down rather than being responsive to him and not so defensive. So it shows up in relationships all the time.
No, it's so good. And I'm wondering if this is an example too. Just because a lot of moms are going to watch this. Okay. New mom has a baby girl, and because of her past relationship with her mom, where she's used to her mom kind of nitpicking and, maybe her way or the highway, her mom makes a suggestion about parenting this new baby girl. Adapted self is, Mom, I don't need advice. I know what I'm doing. This is my baby, whatever. And the authentic self is, thanks, Mom. I appreciate your insight. I will definitely take that into consideration. And just know that your mom is coming from, she's doing the best she can with what she knows. She's choosing to make that comment, and you're choosing not to react. Would that be?
That's a perfect example. Yeah, that's great.
And that's hard to do, but not impossible.
Right. And the question is, why are you reacting? What is that telling you? What is that telling you about what's going on inside of you? Not that it's your mom's fault. It's that something's happening in you. There's a messaging that you're picking up that you're resisting.
When we react, it is always coming from a deeper place. Can you expand on that?
And that's something we need to pay attention to. It's not just, okay, I'll change my response. It's, why did I react that way? And it's tapping in. One thing I'm noticing is that each of the Enneagram type have fears, and not just one fear, but we all have fears. And often our reaction to things is validating our deepest fear. And so my example of my husband, my deepest fear is that I'm insignificant. So when he responds back to me in a certain way, that taps into my fear that I'm insignificant. Or as you said, with the young mom, there's a fear like I'm inadequate or I'm unworthy. It's tapping into a deep fear. And so we can pay attention to our reaction, but we also need to ask what's going on below the surface and why did I react that way? There's some message in there that needs to be addressed.
We're talking about the adapted self versus the authentic self. So my next question is, in regards to the Enneagram, when you're taking this Enneagram test, how do you know the number you're receiving taking the test isn't your adapted self's number? If someone hasn't done the deep work you have, how do we know the number that is the correct number?
Well, that leads me to clear up something that's really important, is that this is not a test. You can't determine the type that you identify with, and I call it the pattern that you identify with the most, by a test. Because like you said, it could be you're having a bad day and you answer these questions a certain way, and yes, I always do that. No, I don't do that. And then the next day you're having a really good day and you feel great about yourself, you're going to answer it differently. So I just really discourage people from relying on a test. I'm not saying that the tests aren't helpful or validate what you've already discovered, but this is a process of self-discovery. And that's why I really, I just say you are the test. And so you have to do the deeper dive and read about the types and start paying attention to yourself and say, oh yeah, and pay attention to your response to it or your reaction, like, oh, I don't like that. Yes, that's true about me. Or yes, that is true. That's me at my best. So that's what the journey is paying attention and learning the types, and then picking out the type that you most identify with rather than relying on a test.
I love that, Marilyn. And what if someone is listening to you right now and if they're just daunted by this? How long is it going to take me to do this deep dive? I just want to feel better. I want to be more joyful. I want to have freedom. How long is this going to take?
Wow. Well, that's probably a very individual question, because some people are pretty self-aware already. Like for me, the minute I heard the Enneagram and my type 9 was described, it was like, oh, wow, there's me. And yes, let's go for it. And for other people, it's a longer process. So I think there's not a real answer to that, but you have to have this willingness to be open to yourself, right, to be open to some of the humiliation that comes with learning your type. Like your adapted self is screaming hard not to be revealed, but when you get in touch with it, it's so freeing to let go of it. But it can be a long journey for some people.
So to your point, it's freeing. You say in your book, it's exhilarating and a relief to find something that's been missing. You said this in your first book, Self-Delude, Self-Define. What do you mean by exhilarating and a relief? Because I loved the word exhilarating and a relief.
Well, when we're honest with ourselves and we have this, I call it a holy aha moment, when it's like all of a sudden the light turns on and we've been struggling with, why do I keep doing this over and over again? Or why am I screaming at my kids all the time? Not that we all don't scream at our kids, because they can drive you crazy sometimes. And then we figure out, we have the light turns on and we go, oh, that makes so much sense. Of course, that's why I'm doing it. And that's an exhilarating feeling when that light turns on and when something is clarified so much. And then it's also a relief to go, oh, now I know what the situation is, and I can work on it, or I can address it. Like it's not such a mystery. So I think it's both of those.
Holy aha moments. That's the greatest thing that we could have come up with in this interview.
Absolutely. A holy aha moment, that aha of clarity, but it's a revelation from God too. Because when God starts to speak to you, it is exhilarating. It is a relief. It's not meant to be condemning. It's not tearing you down. It's building you up. Mm-hmm. And so all of that is divine and holy.
I remember the moment 14 years ago, 13 years ago, when I got to the place of, I'm ready. I'm ready to receive. I know there's something more, and I'm ready to receive it. And the Lord really started it was like overnight. I was immediately self-aware of everything. But those holy aha moments I started having, and it's a beautiful thing. It is so freeing. And so I really relate to that. I asked our first guest ever on this show this question. Okay. And this is kind of a long setup. A friend sent me a meme that was going around with some of her friends in her network. And it basically said, I find that if I try to be more like Jesus, it works better than trying to become a better me. And mind you, the people posting this, it was pretty clear in their caption that they were not excited about all the self-discovery people are talking about and the personal development people are talking about. So in your book, you quoted David Benner from the book Sacred Companions, and it said, the essence of Christian spirituality is following Christ on a journey of personal transformation. To me, this really explains the importance of personal development. And I really wanted to get your take on the meme, that meme going around, and how you feel about people working on themselves. Why is that important, this self-discovery?
Yeah, I'd like to describe this in an experience that I had with that same question in a season. And this was a season of who am I and what am I doing and why am I here and what's my calling? And I had this image, this picture in my mind, and I see things in images. So I had three different pictures. One is like a photograph of me in the front and being very clear, and the background is very fuzzy with Jesus in the background. So that is like the adapted self, just me full on being all about me, and Jesus is in the background. And the second one was Jesus was very clear in the picture, but I was fuzzy in the background. So that's all about die to yourself, don't be anything. It's all about Jesus and nothing about you, about me, and that's how I felt. And these are the questions I was asking at the time. And the third frame was me and Jesus very clear next to each other. And I had a sense from Jesus that he said, we can both be clear. And I won't diminish you and you don't diminish me, but we both need to be clear. And that was a holy aha moment for me. Like, it's okay for me to show up as my truest, authentic self and to do things that are my giftedness and to work on my personal development. Jesus doesn't diminish our personal growth. And that was an aha moment for me that clarified that journey of the importance of being clear and being yourself. But Jesus is the same way, and we're side by side. We're together.
I love that, those visions. Isn't it still a spotlight on the Lord when we have that transformational growth and he's still right there as clear as we are? To me, I feel like he would be cheering us on.
It brings God glory when we step into our truest self.
Oh, I love that.
We, act in the way that he created us to be. It brings God glory.
Something that I'm noticing more and more, motivational speakers popping up, and they're amazing. And they are saying really important things. And they are helping people be confident and believe that they can start this business or make more money or crush it in this or that area of life. But I also feel like there is a deeper work that is going to be just as important in sustaining this motivation. And I'd love for you to expand on that.
We need to have a foundation of our true value that is a bedrock of what we're doing, so that our accomplishments, what we want to get done, the money we want to make, all of that stuff is coming from a foundation of our value, so that our identity, our true identity, isn't based on those things. And if we're striving and trying to make ourselves something that matters and to validate and to promote ourselves, it's not going to last and it's not going to satisfy. If that foundation of our true identity, our true sense of our worth is already settled, it's a settled question, but we need to know that. And that's what you can build on to do something and to be motivated. I mean, with this book, it was a calling. I didn't even expect for it to be well-known or popular. I didn't do all the marketing. I just wrote it because I knew that I had a message that God was giving me to give. And I did the hard work, but I'm not relying on it for my identity. I'm thrilled that it's great, and I'm thrilled that people like you love it and that it's helped people, but it's not my identity. It's not my true identity. And so that bedrock of our value and our identity needs to be established, or we'll just keep trying too hard, striving, and it won't satisfy our deepest needs in our heart.
I want to talk a little bit more about the Enneagram. And your books, your writing are about the Enneagram being a mode for transformational growth, which is huge and deep and so good. But there are a lot of people that hear the Enneagram and they find their number and that's it. They say, oh, that's totally me. Here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses, accept me. And they don't realize that that's not the whole story.
Well, it can certainly be an excuse. And it can also be a way of thinking that the other danger is that thinking if you know somebody's type, that you know them and you don't. And that, people and use it against people or use it to categorize them into little boxes and think that you know them. And it's really dangerous that our conversations go quickly to what Enneagram type are you? Like, I don't have time to get to know you. As long as I know your type, I know you, which is just really sits that instant society, instant culture kind of thing. I just want to know and then move on. And if the Enneagram, if understanding your type, knowing your type doesn't bring you to a place of confession and and hit the wall with it, then it's really, it's not doing its work. If it's just to validate the adapted self and say, well, I'm just that way and this is the way I am and everybody just deal with me, then it's not doing its work. It needs to be and that's what book 2 will be about, is where did those lies come from? Where did those fears come from? How did they begin in childhood? How does God want to heal those memories and those perceptions so that you can be free from that, to reframe, to build a new neuroplasticity in our minds so that those habitual habits don't just go running, we go down the same path all the time. And so if it's not transformational, then people will get bored with it. It'll just be another fun little thing to talk about, but it's missing the point. It's meant to be transformational.
Yeah, it's meant to bring freedom, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Marylinn, I'm going to go do exactly what I said I don't like when people do. What's your number?
I identify with type 9, the pattern of type 9, and I really want to help people say I identify with the pattern of type 9 rather than I am a 9. Because it's I identify with the pattern of type 7. Okay.
I identify with the pattern of type 7. I'm not a 7. You cannot put me in a box, people.
That's correct. Yeah. And all 9 types have a certain pattern that's common to each person if you identify with that type. But each person is a unique expression of that type, and you don't know them. And the discovery of yourself, you don't know yourself just by saying I'm a type 9. You have to discover what that means for you personally.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Sure enough.
I'm excited about your new book. Do we have a title yet?
We don't have a title yet. It's still in process. So
okay. If I can help out with that, let me know. Self-delude, self-define, Marilyn Vancil, a biblical approach to the 9 Enneagram types. It's so good. And I've already just underlined, and I am forcing my husband to read it as well. No, I don't have to force him. He's excited to read it. So thank you for being with us. I've had a really great time chatting.
Well, it was great to be with you. Appreciate it.
Yes, and good luck. And I can't wait for the next book. I am so thankful that Marilyn joined us today. If you're watching, we actually have a podcast of this show, and you can find it on all podcast platforms. Just hit subscribe and it'll come right into your inbox every week. And if you're listening to the podcast, we have a video form of this. Go to YouTube, search Rainey Tenney, and we'll pop up, and subscribe to that too. Thank you everyone for joining me and tuning in. And in regards to personal development and self-discovery, remember, we can no longer consider ourselves merely onlookers that have no effect on the world that we're observing. In fact, the sheer act of observation is an act of creation. That is by John Wheeler, and that is truth. See you next time.